right, my friends and colleagues, I very much value an hour. Many of you are starting school this week, or I know our friends in Mississippi and Florida are getting started. Many people are getting started today, actually. Those of us in the Northeast have a little bit of a later start. I just like to say hello and welcome. You are, if you've signed up and believe that you're in the LDC Quarterly Leadership Meeting, you are in the right place. This meeting is for anybody who's really needing to lead implementation in a school district or network. It's an eclectic mix of, we got assistant principals, some coaches, superintendents, central office folks like director of curriculum or director of PD. We get some State Department folks. I know Wayne Stevens from Kentucky is here. And PD partners like our friends from SREB, Generation Ready, ARC, some of those folks. And we have Luis Nazario here from the New York City Department of Education. So just a real nice mix of people. And that really makes the sharing very rich. And the power of disseminating this work, much more likely. What I'm going to do is, since we do have a couple first-timers here, I'm going to take a really quick, 2-3 minutes, and just do that little bit about LDC for first-timers. It's probably a good elevator speech or maybe a new slide or two for those of you who have been doing work for a while and are always refining how you're talking about that. I think there's still something there for you. We're going to talk a little bit about then two main topics: evidence of impact and setting leaders up for success. I want to drill down into some of the new resources that have been developed that you have access to, and then close with some updates. After today's meeting, you'll be able to access the PowerPoint and any resources shared at ldc.org/community. Next week, there will be a follow-up email that goes out that says, here's the recording and slide. Sounds like someone needs to mute themselves. I also want to make sure that if you have not been on ldc.org for a while, that you take another look at that website, at our main website, because we have updated it and made it much more easy for you to find the resources you need and really tell a cohesive story about LDC to the folks you work with. I'd love for you to just take a moment and type in the chat who you are, where you're from, and what do you hope to take away from today? Just take a moment to get to know each other, because there are some folks here on this call that do know each other, but we also have some new faces, which is great for a new school year. Take a moment to do that. As I see people typing and entering in the chat where you're from, I also just want to remind everybody that as we started this call, we were congratulating Judy Commander on recently becoming a nationally certified LDC coach. We're joking a little bit about that C in LDC as a collaborative, but I do want to remind you that this really is a big network, and one of our goals is that we don't work in isolation, all doing the same work, just kind of growing more weary, but that we quickly learn from each other, share our knowledge, disseminate it more widely, and impact more kids, teachers, and schools. Real quickly, for those of you who are new to LDC and just kind of checking it out, our theory of action is really that task predicts performance. And that if you want to change what's happening in schools, you have to push on improving the rigor of assignments, which is going to mean that content is taught at a higher level. It's going to be more rigorous thinking work in a way that engages kids. And because teachers are involved in the planning of rich standards-driven tasks, it increases their skill as they plan, teach, evaluate the results, and then refine the next assignment. There's a large body of work on assignment quality, where we can really say that better assignments, well taught, improve student results. When we think about LDC, yes, modules and mini tasks are artifacts. They show teacher planning, and then when taught, you get to see student results. But LDC is more than modules. It's really a school transformation system or a planning system that's situated not in a silo, not in something you do one year, make a couple modules and then move on to the next thing, but really within a school's larger goals. Schools plan an implementation strategy to situate the work in their goals. Perhaps it's alignment. Maybe it's improving instructional rigor and consistency across classrooms. And they choose a pathway. Many times folks are using common modules that already exist and adapting them and having large groups of teachers use them as curricular anchors. In some cases, people are designing modules to situate within curriculum blueprints or for a specific purpose. At the same time, in that pathway, there's leader development, whether it's a coach or a site lead. In New York, in the I3 project, and LA, we often call them project liaisons, so that there's a dual pathway of teacher and leader learning. Along the way, people are using data analytics and the artifacts to monitor and adjust so that we aren't surprised at the end by whether that PD experience took hold or not. Also, a through line is this idea of peer review and having common indicators and criteria using the curriculum alignment rubric to have standards of quality, and that we have the same quality standards and language that we apply to curriculum all throughout our work. And ultimately, this whole notion is that when well positioned within the work we already do, LDC will take root. We'll use it to produce stronger curriculum, teach it well collaboratively, learn and build our teacher skills from that experience, and students will produce better work. When we think about that, it's really a backwards design system. All along the way, we're impacting and building the capacity of every member of the system. LDC kind of sits at that nexus between curriculum, improving the quality of the curriculum, growing teacher skills, improving student outcomes, and ultimately building local capacity. Really, it's all of the work and the framing as we go into sites and as we work through the school year, isn't that it's doing about LDC. I probably use the words LDC less than I ever did. It's really about standards-driven instruction with better assignments on as many students' desks as possible, as many days as possible, and as many classrooms as possible. Trying to do this work at scale and learn from each other. So for those of you that are new to LDC, that's at a high level what we're all about. For those of you who have been implementing LDC for a while, I'd love for you to just take a moment and think, was there any new framing here or positioning of how you might talk about this work and think about this work in your sites? Let's just take a moment and put in the chat for our folks who this is their first time coming to the leadership meeting. We want you to come on back. And for those of you who have been here before, I'd love to hear real quickly, that little bit. How can you take and use that? What is that making you think about in your work? Lots of great comments in the chat about using LDC purposefully, that really this is part of the work you're already doing. It's a way to help you perhaps reach your goals faster or more easily or across more subjects. One of the unique things about LDC is that you can go K-12, all subjects. I'm hearing a lot of those kinds of things in the chat. Want to thank you all for those comments, and please keep them coming and have your own conversations. Then the rest of our meeting, we basically have two key areas that we're going to work with. One is thinking about evidence. If we want LDC to really impact student outcomes, we need to be driving towards that and thinking about the evidence that we're using to gauge our impact at an outcome level, but also all throughout the year. What I'd love for you to do is take a moment, think about some of the sources of evidence that you see here on the PowerPoint. And go ahead and just respond to this question. How are you using evidence to gauge your impact with LDC? We've seen ACT scores from some of the sites, and when we're starting to look at year 1 and into year 2. Great. As people keep typing and keep sharing your examples, I'd like to share a few for you because it's great to have success stories in your hip pocket, your own, and also those from other sites. Some of the examples we have that you can certainly take and use this year. I'm going to get my PowerPoint to move here real quickly. Is just emerging evidence from I3. And I would certainly love any of the folks that are here working from LA and New York to chime in the chat or virtually. Or Suzanne Simons, who's also worked in this work. One of the things we're really seeing is that teachers who've really just got in and tried LDC, they didn't worry about having the perfect module, but they got in and they implemented 2+ modules in a year, showed really significant gains. Sometimes we wonder, how much does it take? And that's one of our learnings from this year. We're seeing changes on outcome assessments like SBAC. And also, we're seeing changes in teacher evaluation. Right? So that we're starting to see changes in students, but also in the capacity of teachers through creating and implementing standards-driven assignments. We're seeing this in school performance ratings. Here's a great example from PS 48 and PS 311 in New York City. And again, anyone on the team from that, feel free to jump in. We're seeing lots of comments about that in the chat, but super excited to see growth on multiple measures. And I think that's one of the lessons in terms of how we're gauging and showing our impact, that we're hearing about student engagement, school performance profiles, multiple methods of doing that. Justin from Florida, Stevenson Elementary, which has really been growing and evolving as an LDC site, was named the #1 elementary school of 2,200 schools on growth scores, and #6 in mean scores. You know, maintaining high scores and continuing to show growth is really a challenge. And when you look at a capacity building system like LDC, you can really see how people can continue to go deeper and how we keep learning from the work, and then that really reflects in the results. So just a couple examples for you. We'll keep that chat going. What I'd like to have you think a little bit about with me is those measures were outcome measures. Those are things where you're working hard all year long, but those results are coming in once a year. One of the things I'd like you to just be thinking about with me is how you were looking at this throughout the year. And I know as I look across who's in this virtual room, lots of you have metrics that you're using. So how are you thinking about whether your LDC implementation is on track? I'd love for you to put that in the chat, or again, please feel free to use the mic. How are you gauging? What are a couple quick things you're looking for? Signs of health in your LDC implementation. Did you ping and put that in? Seeing student engagement, how is that measured? Student surveys, how else? Are teachers producing modules? Hearing teacher engagement, that's interesting. First we saw student engagement, then we saw teacher engagement. As we're thinking about that, I love this principle with the piled up desk. One of the things I'd like to do is just do a quick summary of some of the sources of evidence that you can use when implementing LDC. And there are probably some others I'm not thinking about that are coming through the chat. But I'd like to kind of call these out as we're beginning the year for you to think a little bit about what are you using or relying on more heavily. Sometimes I use one more heavily than the other, and I really want to have multiple measures. I think about Victoria Bernheit's assessment system, and we're talking a little bit about student voice, teacher voice, artifacts, test scores, that really when we use multiple measures, we have a much stronger feel. We're looking at outcome measures, but we need in-process measures. One of the things I want to make sure everybody's acquainted with, most of the people on this call are licensees of the LDC Teacher Learning Kit. If you aren't, you are going to have access beginning today for 2 weeks to be able to poke around and see these things for yourself. But one of the ways that people are really gauging the health of their implementation very early on is module activity. Are teachers writing, revising, standards-driven plans? The other thing folks are looking at is, are these teachers receiving feedback to help make the plans better? Are teachers giving each other feedback, or perhaps they're working with a coach or a principal? And then any plan is kind of like a hypothesis. I don't want to say fairy tale, but it is, our wish until it's been taught. So we can also track and see if student work's uploaded, because that can tell us something about what the students learned from the lesson, and then upon reflection, what the teachers can learn. We can also track, because LDC is a competency-based system, the expertise badges that people are earning, as well as course completion badges. And just as a reminder, the evidence-based badges are, can you design and apply core principles? Can you create a standards-driven task and an instructional plan? Are you calibrated to national norms around quality in curriculum? Can you say this is a standards-driven lesson? Are the resources promoting higher level of thinking? All of these expert badges deal with authorship and then calibration around national norms. I can track this in real time on a daily basis using the LDC Learning Report. I know that Wayne is here, and we've been working with, from Kentucky, we've been working with 20 coach candidates across the state of Kentucky who've been building modules, giving each other feedback, and working on coach certification. So it's a daily dashboard in terms of, when I look at the blue dot, folks are working on their modules. The yellow diamond means they're getting feedback. The green star is showing that they're earning badges. And again, the red diamonds are showing that they're uploading student work. So I can see every day along the way that teacher engagement and that evidence of implementation. I'd love for you to take a moment and play this out with another example. Here's an example of a report. You see the codes at the bottom: blue dot module activity, yellow diamond feedback, red triangle student work, green star badge or certificate earned. Let's pretend this was in your Core Tools account tomorrow. What could you know about whether your implementation is on track? What could you wonder? Or what could you say? Just take a moment, think about that, and try it out right now, since we're talking about evidence. Go ahead and put something in the chat. Okay, and you solved this version. I talked you through it a little bit. Now you're looking at another example. So as you're taking a look at the chat, you're seeing you can very quickly in a couple minutes, just think about, your daily cup of coffee or whatever beverage you have in the morning. You can take a quick scan at this visual summary, and knowing what your implementation plan is the year. Are teachers writing or teaching, or should they be finishing up modules? You can get a quick gist as to what's happening. Who as a cohort, you're making all these great comments about the cohort, about the feedback. I see teacher number 1 is having a blast. And wondering too about, are teachers to teachers giving each other comments? Maybe this is something that's not evolving over time and should be. That was just one example of the analytics you have to answer that question: is your implementation on track? That was the from the learning report, the visual summary, again, updates every morning. You also have the ability to see, are teachers earning evidence-based badges? Sometimes folks will say to me, well, I want my teachers to get, or my coaches to get really good at giving feedback. The first thing I ask is, have they actually designed a rated task and ladder themselves? Because the best way to lead people is by doing it yourself. So peer reviewing and calibrating to become certified really isn't an exercise until you do it yourself. And that really changes you. So you can see across that report where folks are in the process as teachers and coaches in their own learning. And you can even see on the far right, Luigi and Grover have that second coach badge. And again, coach is behavior, not job title. It's people who support other people. That could be a department chair, it could be an AP, it could be somebody who does have the title of job coach, or effectiveness coach, or co-op lead. But that extra badge means that 5 other teachers developed rated curriculum as a result of working with you. The other reports are showing, hey, are folks moving along in the online professional learning that helps them do this work? Are they working as a cohort, as a PLC, and learning how to design and implement together? The bottom report shows, are people looking at examples? Examples is one of the best way to produce good examples yourself. Are they giving each other feedback? So all of these reports, oh my gosh, this chat is taking on a life of its own. You can see, really, back to that question, is my implementation on track? The data analytics and the badging can really help you throughout the year get a sense of how individuals and a cohort is moving. I'd like to remind you of a couple other ways you can think about this, and please feel free to comment on whether these are things you're using and finding are working well. Give each other ideas. One of the things we're finding is just taking a look at assignments can tell us how we're doing. Non-LDC assignments, are the quality and alignment of them improving in terms of standards? Could I code them for standards the same way I might code an LDC assignment? What am I seeing in terms of that? I should be able to see whether an assignment becomes rated eventually. Right from the get-go, we should start to see improvement in these assignments. And really, the one on the left is the before of work that a teacher did with feedback, peer feedback, and coach feedback to improve on the right-hand side. That's a clear way to be looking for evidence. Are we doing that periodically? Maybe the 15th of the month is our early dismissal, where we all bring what one assignment we taught that day, and we code each other's assignments, and we code a piece of student work. And as a faculty, are we getting tighter and tighter, kind of going from talking about the standards to actually putting them in practice? The other thing we can be using are the benchmark mini tasks. These were new late last year, so I wanted to call your attention to them because, I don't know about you, but that summer almost washes out last year. So I wanted to make sure you see the benchmark mini tasks. And those mini tasks were really based on the informational and literary reading standards, zoning in on our 1, 2, and 4. Those are high leverage standards that recur throughout learning across disciplines. So using the benchmark mini tasks almost as anchor mini tasks could really help you get some evidence about skills progression and promote collaborative learning across your faculty. When you think about that collection, you'll see that it's organized with upper elementary, lower elementary, middle, and high. You'll see the name of the standard. And if you haven't been in that yet, I just wanted to call out for you one of my favorite examples, theme statement and supporting details. This is the upper elementary version. It's a half-an-hour lesson. There is never enough in a reading series on developing theme, and there's a lot of teacher confusion about the difference between theme, topic, main idea, particularly at that elementary into middle level. You can see the standards alignment, a clear prompt, how to teach it. The resources are here, and then what's really beautiful is the scoring guide. Just a simple scoring guide that gets to the heart of the standard. So if you think about your kids who are building foundational skills and discrete assessments, like a words correct per minute or a fluency check, are not what you need for those reading for this level of reading skills, but you don't want to sit down and do a 45-minute benchmark assessment for comprehension as frequently. This gives you an authentic assessment that you can cross-cut across disciplines. So when you're thinking about your evidence this year, yes, the data analytics, yes, looking at the tasks themselves. Benchmark mini tasks is something to add to your arsenal. And then don't forget, looking at the student work from mini task and from teaching tasks and coding it to see if the thinking work of the standards is right there in the assignment. You can use that literally with the standards. Let me just, whoops, I just pulled that away. Let me just pull up a piece of student work to show you what I mean. So that student work just left me. You know what, folks? I just lost that piece of work that I had earlier. I think I'm going to keep going. I'll make sure we put that in our follow-up. And then also we have the student work rubrics as well. So I could be coding for standards and linking the thinking at that level. I could be coding for specific disciplinary content or reading and writing development. So that was for you, just a quick tour of how I'm thinking about some of the evidence that I might use to keep my implementation on track. I'd love to hear from you how you're using these sources of evidence and what else, what other refinements you're thinking about. The way I'd like you to do this is to make it a pair conversation. So what you're going to do is Diane and Monique are going to talk to each other. You're going to do that when you go to the chat feature where it says to everyone. You're going to pick the name of your partner. So I could be picking Abby Hammer, and I should see to Abby in parentheses privately. I'm going to respond to her. We're going to have a conversation. We're going to take about 2 minutes or so to talk about sources of evidence that I've just shared, how you're using them, and what other refinements you're thinking about. So let's just take 2 minutes or so to talk to each other. Okay. I hope you've been having a great conversation about the kind of evidence that you're using that really follows the natural instructional cycle of teachers planning, teaching, analyzing the evidence of student work along the way with the mini tasks to monitor and adjust, and then on the final product, the reflection that's involved, and then the decision making about what to do next. Can anybody share out anything from your conversation? Please use the mic, and I'm just looking for an idea or two. What's something that you talked about to close this section on thinking about evidence? I know a lot of you use Zoom, so somebody can take the mic.
Well, I'm going to share Louis, my partner's, 2 comments that I find so true. First of all, it's hard, messy work.
Mm-hmm.
So to do this, we've got to have some kind of plan. You can't do all of it. If you've been training one way, then we have to sort of step in using this evidence in a different way. So that makes it hard, messy work. But the other part that he commented on is that it's not just work with teachers, but working with teachers and administrators. It's finding that balance to explain what the reports mean and the guiding principles. So if the data isn't, like he said, not weaponize the data in any way. Because how do you balance using the data? And then his point, which I totally agree, we want this open place where teachers are free to make mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
So all of that does make it messy, but I mean purposeful, but we just have to be thoughtful about that.
Great point, Judy. How about one more from your conversation? Somebody else before we move on.
I think we're starting to see some evidence that helps us with the continued spread of LDC, in that some of our test scores this year have shown us that there are some clear differences in the same kinds of classrooms in our district where teachers have been using LDC with fidelity. And what we're seeing is we may all have the same number of students who pass the test, but what we're seeing the difference in are the teachers who are implementing 2 to 3 plus LDC modules are showing more growth in the 3s and 4s that are happening, which is where we want all of our students to be. So that gives us more, I like the weaponize. We don't want to weaponize in a bad way, but sometimes it does help us line our arsenal with if you've become stagnant, this is maybe a place where this is why, and how can we help from there?
I love that. But that conversation too is again about growth. So what a great theme. Thank you so much,
Sherry,
Judy.
can I ask Sherry a question? This is Suzanne from LDC. Sherry, are you finding that those same teachers are also the teachers who teach more modules are actually just more actively energized and engaged in general with using LDC?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And they're looking, they're looking for leadership opportunities now as a result of it. It's really growing them all the way around as a professional.
I mean, it reminds me, I went there was a school in New York last year, PS48, actually, the school that has some of that preliminary data. And we went there for a demo day. And the teacher that was so just, bristling with enthusiasm was the one who said to me, she said, I just keep going through the library and taking a module and I just teach it and I try it out and then I'm writing my own and then I try another one. Like that kind of more active use of things made her happier, right? I mean, it certainly was making her kids happier too, but it was making her happier. And that seemed to be driving her in a different way. So that's why I asked.
I think that's interesting too, Suzanne, because I think what you're expressing is that those are the teachers who are finding that your heavy lifting comes before you go into the classroom. And then it's an absolute joy to get up and go in and facilitate purposely designed instruction that leads kids to make discoveries. And you're not as mentally and physically exhausted at the end of the day. Number one, because you're energized by what happens in the classroom when you watch kids interact in that way, but also it was purposeful, it was designed, and it was delivered in a way that lets students do the heavy lifting, the mental heavy lifting, which is what they need to be doing. Yeah,
I think that's absolutely really interesting. I mean, I do also think there's something to be said for, we hear a lot about how, teachers don't do their first, they get school started, they don't do their first module until October, November, December. Like, I just really think that if you don't get that in front of kids really quickly, then the teachers don't see the excitement and that get energized themselves. And so we're really delaying their enthusiasm when we delay, how long it takes for them to teach that first module. So it's interesting.
It is interesting, and that's a great segue into thinking about how can you set leaders and set your school up for success. And I think that's a great practical tip from what we've been learning. I just love to hear from other people using the mic or the chat. What are some other key strategies and actions that you have that are on your short list for launching or reinvigorating using LDC in your district? So we could turn this into a conversation using the mic, but also in the chat.
Well, I'll add one more thing to this new question, Barb, and that it was so much fun to watch the reinvigoration that happened with our teachers by submitting some tasks for peer review and having some badges earned from that, and just being validated in the work that they're doing. It was amazing. It happened automatically with that.
That is so cool, because something like that can feel so sort of, talk about weaponizing, right? Like something like that can feel so judgy, right? So the fact that they were so validated seems really exciting.
Well, I think I probably need to add there, though, I'm not going to lie, it was intimidating on the front end, putting your stuff in, right? Mm-hmm. But, and this is where I saw part of my job as the coach too, was to sort of get the feedback first so that I could help if there was tremendous feedback of revisions that needed to be done, so I could help maybe soften that blow a little bit or whatever in getting that revision. But that was me being cautious. The feedback that came back was nothing but constructive, nothing but validating that they were being seen as a professional who wanted to do good work with students. And so it turned out, it's been a beautiful experience.
That's terrific. Lewis, this is multiple years for you now, starting this work with multiple schools and principals in New York. For you, a key strategy or a tip?
While Lewis is turning on his mic, I just want to tell everybody that he's got 55 sites this year in New York City. So it's quite a job he's doing. Are you there, Lewis?
He's in the chat. He may not be able to get a mic.
Personalized. Mm-hmm. Knowing the school.
And knowing the teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what I'd like to do in our last 10 minutes or so is share with you some resources that we've created and refined with your help to support leaders. I would definitely say that they're version 1 or version 2, but they're really designed from working with sites and partners around the country, getting your impact, getting your input along the way. So within the Teacher Learning Kit, one of the things that we have, in addition to the online courses and the data analytics, the great supports for coaches to work with their PLCs, is also a site lead implementation toolkit. Since this was just updated in June, and many of us, that's a little bit of our scurry around in the summer, I'm not sure how many people have gotten to see what's all there yet. So we wanted to take the opportunity to let you know, 1, you have this, and 2, to show you where it is. So on the resource page in Core Tools, you have turned on something that's a site lead implementation toolkit. And again, if your school doesn't have a Teacher Learning Kit license, we've given you access for the next 2 weeks so that you can play along and look at the wonderful resources as well. All of the rest of the resource page is here. When you click on it, you're going to see how to use this kit and then 7 sections. If you're new to the work or thinking about a reboot, you have everything you need here to really lead you step by step through a thinking process that can help you comprehensively map out a plan that considers all your stakeholders, situates LDC into larger goals, and addresses questions around resource allocation, kind of prompts you to think about things like technology, teacher meeting time, and there are tons of easy to edit templates and examples. If you've been working with implementing LDC for a while, you might find that the resources here are good to just dip into for a specific problem of practice, such as getting measurable impact or situating LDC in the school goals rather than as an add-on. So you might find more value in specific sections. The beauty is you have access to the thinking and lessons learned from other people, just like you. You're going to find some tools and resources that you can use without doing everything for yourself. And so that's the beautiful thing about community. What I'd like to do is show you a little bit about how this is organized and just show you a couple key pieces. When you look at how to use this online toolkit, there are 2 master documents, a site leader implementation guide and a beginning your implementation workbook. I think of them really as the guidebooks. When you open the Site Lead Implementation Guide, you're going to see that there are 7 sections. Guess what? The toolkit then has the same 7 sections. So you can have the guide as one whole, almost like a little white paper document with the 7 sections that you could kind of work through and read through, but you can also have the key content broken up into 7 sections so you can grab and go with resources that address, for example, beginning your implementation versus things that are more bigger picture, like the teacher competencies or the problems of practice, which would be in section 1. So I kind of think about this. People always laugh when I say this. It's almost like the cinnamon monkey bread. You can have the whole thing in one spot, or you can pull it apart. The second key document is the implementation workbook, which you can print out and literally write all over and use in a planning conversation. Lewis could use that with his 55 schools. In the SREB network, you could use that with multiple schools. Sherry could be using that with building principles in her district. When you take a look at it, I'd like to just share with you a couple things you might use here at the beginning of the year. First of all, is that LDC Site Lead document with the table of contents. It really does walk you through. There's a description of the 7 sections, but it really does walk you through a first conversation in a building or district about using LDC, not doing it, about situating the work and problems of practice, and really very quickly positions it at a high level. So it's a great introductory document. Here it is in the Site Lead Guide. And then when you go over and look in the toolkit, if you wanted just that one document, you could print it out as a 2-pager. So again, I just want to keep showing you the relationship between whole guide, but you could pull this apart just for that one conversation. Maybe that's enough. You have 20 minutes to drop in a principals meeting. And then you're going to have the resources right there you need, problems of practice and teacher competencies. So section 1 on its own in the toolkit is really useful for those high-level conversations, situating the work in larger goals, and it is in the beginning of the Site Lead toolkit. The second section in the Site Lead Guide and in the toolkit, which really resonates with building principles and folks who are thinking about how to make this work, is this idea of T4. It's a simple acronym that, again, makes that nice 2-pager where it's talking to folks about, think about who your team is, think about technology access, think about sheltering time, and making sure that teachers have access to quality text. And again, when I look at that, it's in the guide, but then for sure, here it is as that 1-pager. So what I could begin to see, I know Rankin, Lake, many school districts, they have a monthly principal meeting that is more like professional development. These are the kinds of things that you could be pulling out and using. The other part of the toolkit that you might really use now is the beginning your LDC implementation. When you look at this, you'll see, and I'm just going to open it here, you'll see some key things that you'll want to do in sequence, like identifying problems of practice, outlining your key goals, deciding who will be involved in implementing LDC, and then beginning to think about what the work looks like across a school year. So that gives you a thumbnail as to what that might look like. But all of that can be found, and this is where the workbook is really helpful. The how to begin your implementation can really be worked through as a conversation using the workbook. So here's a place to highlight and mark and discuss those high-level problems of practice, where you can get a little bit more concrete about what the building is hoping to accomplish. And then to begin to think about how you might structure an implementation. For example, you may be thinking you want to develop curriculum anchors quarterly for the subject areas that have end of course assessments. So that first year, you may pick some grade levels that have that end of course assessment, put them on a cycle, second year more, third year more of those. You could organize your implementation by the willing, the early adopters first. You know, it's not about the discipline in this case. So there are some examples to think and talk through, because we know that this work takes hold best with the willing, right? And for a specific purpose, such as, again, equity for kids, increasing writing across the school system using anchor assignments, that kind of thing. The other thing that the tools guide you to do is to think about your human capital. We know this can't be run by one person from a central office, but also having one superstar principal do it in one school out of 30 isn't really guaranteeing equity for your kids or for your teachers in terms of the experience they're having. So thinking about roles and responsibilities, and then getting down to the nitty-gritty of beginning to think about what could, give me 1 second, what could a year look like? So you're going to find in this toolkit the resources you need to really walk through and begin from why would I want to do this work? How am I going to situate it? To how could I begin to think about a plan? The beauty of it is for folks who have limited support, we've really tried to lay out and prompt key decision makings. You know, we talk about preventable failure, about learning from what's happening out there so we can inform other folks and help prevent some of those pain points. On the other hand, for many of you, there may be something in here that just fills a gap you have or hits a pain point. We're pretty excited about, and I would love for you to be commenting in the chat. We just really love to hear, you know, how you think you might use some of this or not. If it's not useful and it's like, oh guys, take that away, shut that off, I don't want that, you know, let me know that. I'm hoping we didn't miss like that since a number of you helped develop this, but definitely it's version 1. We want to see which tools really work for you. We also want to hear what's missing or what should be removed because it's too much stuff, you know. Are things logically organized? So we'd love to get feedback on the toolkit itself, but more importantly, and just given our time, we won't do this in Thinking Partners, we'll do this in the whole chat. More importantly, we just love to hear, you know, what's percolating in there for you in terms of how you can apply any of these resources or use them. Take a moment, jot in the chat, and also feel free to jump in and say something. I know that I really had to make a lot of things myself when I started implementing LDC, so I appreciate having some field-tested resources. And Diana, it was so great to meet you today. I'm so excited that you were here. He's looking to digging into the resources. Diana, you've been implementing LDC for a while. What for you here resonated in the leader resources? I'd love to hear from you. Asking people to make sure they Zoom from their own laptops, not as a group. I totally agree for that. That was kind of one of the technology tips, is that if you're doing virtual learning, but folks are in the same school, making sure everybody's accessing from their own computer so they're more engaged. I'm seeing a lot of things about technology supports. And I think for me, one of the things I hear a lot are about dedicated time. You know, making sure that teachers have the time to do the work and appropriately incentivizing that. All right, my friends, we are just about out of time. There are some additional slides here, and I'm just going to really quickly highlight a couple things. The remaining slides you'll find are basically my form of a newsletter. Here's what you might have missed that practically you just want to dig into. And so just a reminder of newsletters, presentations that occurred this past summer, great new collections. There's an exemplary math task and module now in the collection that really helps use really rhetorical devices. Critiquing an argument with math as evidence is pretty amazing. So lots of new resources to use. We want to remind you about the starter task that came out last year in that collection. We paired with the benchmark mini tasks, you can't go wrong. The resources that are available from our national board partnership. And just as a teaser, something we're working on kind of in our thinking lab here is an argumentation toolkit, because that's one of the needs we're really hearing expressed in the field. So as we wrap, those are some of the things you may have missed or are hot off the press. Next week, August 17th, there will be our final summer learning series on peer collaboration and the impact of high quality feedback. There's a calendar for the year of great things to be involved in, like virtual task workshopping. Leadership meetings are occurring quarterly. We hope to see you in October. Coach meetings. For those of you who have instructional coaches, please invite them, share the invite. And as always, I just want to thank you for your time. Please feel free to post any takeaways. And we hope to see you all again soon, either online or in person.